subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update from Rouse IAS. So now we are also officially available on Telegram. To get the latest updates from Rouse IAS, join the official Telegram channel of Rouse IAS, the link for which has been shared in the description. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we'll be taking up the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 31st March 2021. Now the articles to be discussed are reflected on your screen and the time stamping has been provided in the description box below. So now let's begin. Now this article appearing on the page number 6 of the Hindu newspaper has been titled as "Remoteness is no hindrance to academic excellence." Now this article is a response to an earlier article that was published on the 20th February in the Hindu newspaper. Now this article was titled as "Too Many IITs, Unrealistic Expectation." Now in this article, the author had tried to explore the idea as to how many IITs should India have and what these institutions should actually try to achieve. Now at the end, it had ultimately concluded that India should have approximately 10 to 12 IITs and these should be located in urban areas. Now today's article is a response to this article and thus it also focuses on IITs. But since we are studying this article from the point of view of UPSC examination, thus we will focus it only with respect to higher education and its challenges and implications. With respect to especially GS paper 2 as it falls under the mandate of social justice. However, higher education is also important from the point of view of ethics and essay paper. Every year we get a question with respect to education in essay, and also ethics talks about value education. Thus we need to study this topic from the point of view of all the three papers. Now starting off from the ethics and essay point of view, let us try to understand what are the expectations that a society has with respect to the learning outcomes from the higher education system. Now the first and the most important learning outcome, as is obvious, is to provide knowledge with respect to the relevant subject to the students. It is because only a well-informed mind that is aware about the consequences of its actions, only such a person can undertake a very well-informed decision. And thus, it is only because of this reason that the Indian judiciary does not put the similar constraint on a juvenile who has performed a crime. And thus, there are different laws that are applicable to juveniles in India. Now, next important learning outcome that a society expects from its higher education is that it teaches the student these skills, that is economic skills as well as life and social skills. For these students are about to get out of their education system and enter the workforce, and therein they are expected to display these skills and ensure their own economic independence alongside be helpful in furthering the economic development of the country at large. And hence it is the skill set with respect to social and economic that the higher education is expected to provide a student. Now the third and the last ideal outcome that is expected out of higher education is that it helps in development of character of a student. Now child is a reflection of mankind. Thus it is very important to ensure that the education system molds an individual in a manner that it can play a constructive role in shaping the society and the world order, such that the modern values of progressive society are upheld. And hence it is the teaching learning process that is expected to mold an individual's character in the society. Now it is out of these three learning outcomes, that is knowledge, character and skill, that competence is developed in an individual. And hence the ultimate role of higher education in a society is to develop competence in the individuals. So as they move one step, the society at large also is able to move one step towards progressive development. So now the obvious question arises as to how many India's higher learning education and their students are able to fulfill any or all of these ideals. Now, in front of you are two sets of data that try to answer this question. Now, the first data set talks about the employability across the various domains. Now, this takes into account various higher education degrees such as BTech, MBA, BCom, BSc, etc., wherein it reflects the employability of the students that complete these degrees over the years. Now, the recent data suggests that as much as 50% of Indian students that come out of its higher education system are not employable. Now, this is a grave concern and raises various concerns with respect to the quality of higher education in India. And this strikes at the root of two important parameters of competence, that is knowledge and skill. Now let us look at the status with respect to character building of higher education system of India. Now this is the data of IPC released by National Crime Record Bureau. Now this gives an assessment of over the years the rise in crime in Indian society. Now as we can see, collectively there has been an absolute rise in all sort of crimes, that is rape, sexual assault, kidnapping, abduction, cruelty and molestation. And thus we can say that even with respect to character building, Indian education system has not been able to deliver as it should have been. Thus the question arises, what is the reason behind this poor performance of Indian higher education system? Let's give it a look. The first and the most important challenge with respect to higher education system in India is shortage of funds. Now India barely spends 4.6% of GDP on education. Now this is one of the lowest with respect to the developing nations. Now out of this 4.6%, a small allocation is made in the direction of higher education, wherein UGC divides the fund between the central and state universities. Now herein it is suggested that the central universities are given as much as 75% of total grants, while the state university that account for majority of the admission do not receive sufficient grants, as a result of which the higher education in these states are suffering. Now moving on to the second challenge, that is with respect to the low enrollment. Now according to the ASHE report of 2018, gross enrollment ratio in higher education in India is only 26.3%, which is very low when compared to higher education in other developed and developing nations. Now the third important challenge is with respect to the faculties. There is a lack of mechanism for ensuring accountability and assessing the performance of professors in college and universities. And thus, unlike other foreign universities wherein performance of faculties are evaluated by peers and students, India lacks such a mechanism. Now, the higher education system is also facing challenges with respect to the problem of quality. Now, it is suggested that most of the courses of the Indian universities do not address the demand of the industry, as a result of which there is a huge gap between what the curriculum teaches and what is the actual job requirement. And thus it is common to hear that even the brightest of the student mention that they learn more on the job than actual while in the college. And it is because of this almost all companies in the industry have set up their own in-house training system to groom youth of our country as per their industry standards. Now next challenge is with respect to the lack of vocational component. Now most of the Indian higher education system lacks the skill component or the vocational component, as reflected in the 66th NSSO study that suggested that merely 2% of the Indian youth have received any sort of vocational training. And thus it is because of this that the Indian youth lack with respect to the skill development, and their education is mostly theoretical without any practical training. Now the next important challenge is with respect to lack of autonomy in the colleges and universities. Now most of the central and state universities are guided by a lot of regulations, especially when they come under UGC. But outside this, there are a number of institutions such as IITs and IIM who have actually been able to escape these sort of regulations and still are a shining example how absence of regulations have not been able to affect their functioning, and they continue to excel and maintain their global track record. And thus need exists to reevaluate these regulations so as to enhance the autonomy of both central and state universities. Now, next challenge is with respect to the poor infrastructure facilities that these universities and higher education system offer, because of which the extracurricular development of a student is not happening in the Indian university higher education setup. Next challenge is with respect to outdated curriculum, as was discussed earlier, and the last challenge is with respect to inadequate R&D research that is happening in Indian higher education system. Now, there are insufficient resources and facilities as well as limited number of quality faculty to advise students with respect to R&D. Most of the research scholars are without fellowship or are not getting their fellowship on time, which directly indirectly affects results. Further, even the expenditure made on R&D is one of the lowest in the world. And hence it is because of these reasons that the Indian higher education system is not able to undertake research, and as a result of which even the patents registered in India are one of the lowest in the world. Now that we have discussed the challenges affecting Indian higher education system in detail, let us look into the measures that can be undertaken to overcome few of these challenges. Now, one of the most important challenge was with respect to the low expenditure or the low public expenditure in higher education setup. Now, herein the universities can try to mobilize its own resources. Now, this can be done by tapping onto its existing alumni setup or by seeking contribution from the industry. Next important measure is with respect to establishing accountability and tracking performance of teachers. Now, this can be done by setting up a system of performance audit of professors based on the feedback that has been received by students and the colleagues. Further, other inputs such as the number of research paper that has been published by a teacher, the patents it holds, etc. can be taken into account. Now, the third measure is with respect to employable skills. Now, as we have discussed, there is gap with respect to the curriculum that is taught and the skills that are sought by the industry. There is a need to identify the skill gap that exists in various sectors and the courses that are being offered for enhancing the employability. Further measures such as Industry Institute Training Support, Industrial Challenge Forum, Industrial Finishing Schools, etc. can further be undertaken, wherein industry's help is undertaken to bridge the skill and need gap. Now, the last suggestion is with respect to accreditation of institutions. Now, this is considered to be one of the most important measures, for it regularly assesses the performance of institutions and gives them ranking. And this could be one of the most important ways of ensuring quality with respect to higher education. In this regard, National Board of Accreditation can act as a catalyst towards quality enhancement and quality assurance of higher technical education. Now, this accreditation of institution will give rise to a robust rating system that will give rise to a healthy competition among universities and result in overall improvement of their performance and strengthening of India's higher education setup. With this, we conclude discussion of this article. Now, moving on to the next article. Now, this article appearing on the page number 7 of Hindu newspaper has been written by Secretary of Ministry of Fisheries, Animal Husbandry and Dairy. And this has been written in the context of recent concluded International Women Day that appears on 8th of March every year. And this article aims to showcase the achievement of women dairy farmers in India. Now, as we all know, women contributed immensely to the success of White Revolution, and this success in turn has led to social, economic and political empowerment of women in India. It has also given them space in rural leadership and has helped them break free from the traditional practices. Today, as a result of which, India has 1.9 lakh dairy cooperatives, of which 6 million members are purely women. So now as we move ahead in this article, let us look into various facets of feminization of Indian agriculture. The reason behind this growing feminization, the challenges that the women face in Indian agriculture, and the steps that have been taken by the government in the recent years. Now, feminization of agriculture, in simple words, just refers to increasing participation of women in agriculture activities. Now, rural women are engaged in agriculture activities in mainly three ways, that is, as cultivators, as agriculture laborers, and as agriculture landowners, all depending upon their socio-economic status. Now, as per Agriculture Census 2010-11, out of total number of cultivators, as much as 30.3% were women agriculture cultivators. Further, out of the total agriculture labor, 42.6% accounted for female agriculture labor. However, while over the years there have been increase with respect to agriculture laborers and cultivators, women agriculture landowners have not increased as much. Going forward, we will look into the cause for this. But first, let us look into the reason behind this growing feminization of Indian agriculture. Now, one of the most important reasons for female entering the agriculture labor force is poverty. Now, poverty is a major factor due to which women are forced to join agriculture as agriculture labor to supplement the family's reducing income. Now, as we all know, the agriculture sector has been in crisis for quite some time, as a result of which we are seeing recurring agriculture farmer protests in India. Now, even in the present times, while the male agriculture farmers have been protesting, it is the female farmers who have been undertaking agriculture work back home. So, it is the poverty which is one of the main reasons for female entering the agriculture labor force. Now, the second important reason for feminization of agriculture is also related to agrarian distress. Now, this time the agrarian distress is resulting in migration of male farmers towards the urban areas in lookout for casual work. Now, it has been reported that between 2001 and 2011, as much as 7.7 Indian farmers have left rural agriculture and have moved towards the urban areas in lookout for casual labor work. Now, this rising shift of men from farm to non-farm activities has resulted in increased participation of women as cultivators, laborers, and entrepreneurs. Now, the next important reason for feminization of agriculture lies in rising food insecurity. Now, as we all know, the Indian agriculture is witnessing reduced productivity is together with problems such as rising input cost for agriculture, poor implementation of MSP schemes, and rising food inflation. All these factors are giving rise to food insecurity in rural areas. And as a result of which, it is the women members of the household that have to enter agriculture and serve as agriculture labor to ensure adequate food is produced for the family's consumption. Now, the last and the most important factors for rising feminization of agriculture, that is not arising out of distress, rather as a positive development, is mechanization of agriculture. Now, as we all know, farming is a labor intensive job, and mechanization of agriculture is resulting in reduced use of muscle power, and as a result of which the women labor force who were initially only occupied with respect to harvesting, sowing of seeds and rearing livestock now have entered into the hardcore agriculture, wherein they are also undertaking now labor intensive job because of increased mechanization. Now, it is because of these reasons, that is poverty, urban migration, food insecurity and mechanization, that female labor force have entered the agriculture. Now, let us look into the challenges that these females are facing with respect to their employment in agriculture. Now, the first and the most important challenge that the women in agriculture face is with respect to lack of land ownership. Now, data suggests that as much as 86% of the women farmers are devoid of any sort of land rights. Now, this is mainly on account of the patriarchal mindset of the society, because of which the ownership of land is passed from father to son and never to the daughter. Now, as a result of this lack of ownership, the women farmers are not able to access institutional credit, as banks usually consider land as a collateral, and women farmers generally lack access to land ownership. As a result of which, women often lack access to formal credit and access to key inputs that are required for facilitating effective agriculture activity. Now, in order to overcome this challenge, it is suggested that there is need to introduce provision of credit without collateral. Now, this can be done under the NABARD's microfinance initiative, wherein women farmers can be extended without the need of having land as a collateral. Now, moving on to the next challenge, that is declining size of land holding. Now, as we all know, in the recent years, the number of land holdings have doubled while the size of individual land holdings have reduced to half. Now, given majority of Indian farmers hold small and marginal category of land holding, that is less than 2 hectares, thus it becomes a deterrent and non-remunerative for male farmers to undertake agriculture as an economic activity. As a result of which, while the male members of the family move to non-farm activities, it is the women of the family that have to take up the agriculture activity, which is hugely non-remunerative and has very low economic efficiency, given the return of labor on that small piece of land is very low. Now, the solution to this problem lies in encouraging women farmers to undertake collective farming by developing SHGs and women farmer producer organizations, wherein they can come together and bring together their land and other resources so as to undertake effective farming activity by bringing together their small pieces of land and reaping benefits of economies of scales. Now, moving on to the next challenge, that is the need for gender friendly agriculture tool. Now, while the mechanization for agriculture has been increasing in the recent years, still the tools are not as gender friendly, and hence there is a need to bring about a farm mechanization that is easy for women folks to operate, and hence gender friendly tools is the way forward. Now, the last challenge is with respect to lack of access to resources in terms of credit and agriculture inputs such as seed fertilizers and advanced technology that is needed to enhance productivity. Now, in order to resolve this challenge, the need exists to educate and train women farmers through use of Krishi Vigyan Kendra, so as to train women farmers about innovative agriculture technology alongside extending the extension services to the women farmers. At last, need exists to adopt a transformative inclusive agriculture policy that ensures gender specific interventions to raise productivity of small land holdings alongside integrating women as an active agent in the rural development. Now, understanding the benefits associated with the feminization of agriculture in terms of enhancing the labor force participation rate in India that has gotten as low as 20% over the recent years, alongside bringing the women out in the public sphere wherein their labor is actually made visible and even accounted for economically. And hence, feminization can potentially lead to bringing and building a very confident and skilled women labor force for India. And hence, acknowledging this, government over the recent years have been adopting various pro-women farmer policy, such as it has introduced Mahila Kisan Shashakti-karan Pariyojana, which has been undertaken by Ministry of Women Development and is an exclusive program for women farmers. Further, government in the recent budget has allocated at least 30% of the budget allocation for women beneficiaries in all ongoing schemes and programs of the government. And at last, government has also been focusing on developing the women self-help group such as the Kudumshri self-help group that has been working in the southern India and the state of Kerala to bringing in women empowerment in the state. Thus, the need exists to promote such group all across India and help them to connect with microcredit through building of capacity and providing them timely information with respect to ensuring effective decision making and ensuring their economic activity is remunerative. And thus, a question has been extended in this regard such that the feminization of agriculture should be ensured to bring out enhanced decision making for female labor force alongside property right, together with ensuring that the labor extended by the females of the household is not seen as an extension of household world, rather is actually seen as a value generating activity. And it is only then that the feminization of agriculture will bring benefit to the country at large. With this, we come to the end of this article. Now, this article appearing on the page number 10 talks about the recent visit of the External Affairs Minister Mr. S. Jaishankar to Tajikistan, wherein he attended the 9th Heart of Asia Conference. Now, in this conference, Mr. S. Jaishankar talked about the need to accelerate the dialogue between Afghan government and the Taliban, alongside accelerating the intra-Afghan dialogue. Herein, it is the first time that India has actually acknowledged and have made a direct reference to Taliban. And this marks a great shift in India's policy. Further, in this conference, the minister also talked about the concern with respect to rising violence and bloodshed in the past years in Afghanistan. Further, he called for a need of a stable and a sovereign peaceful Afghanistan and a dialogue that is Afghan led, Afghan controlled, and Afghan owned, as has been India's traditional policy. Now, in this article, as we move ahead, we will not be discussing about the Afghanistan issue or the Afghan-India relationship, as that was already covered in the 9th March DNS by Mangal sir. Please refer to this DNS for details about the Afghanistan problem and Indo-Afghan relationship. In today's article, we will discuss about the Heart of Asia conference that is presently ongoing and is important from the point of view of the prelims examination. Now, this Heart of Asia, also known as Istanbul process, is an initiative of the Republic of Afghanistan and Republic of Turkey that was officially launched at a conference hosted by Turkey in 2011. Now, this was sought since US armed forces and the NATO forces from the western countries were soon planning to leave Afghanistan. And hence the regional players thought it was their responsibility to get engaged so as to secure stability, peace and prosperity in Afghanistan, so that there is no terrorism in Afghanistan after the US or the NATO forces leave Afghanistan. And thus, an important platform was envisaged for the regional countries to come together and cooperate. Thus, this Heart of Asia aims at providing a platform for sincere and result-oriented regional cooperation that places Afghanistan at its center. And this platform has been established in recognition of the fact that stable and secure Afghanistan holds key for vital prosperity of the Heart of Asia region. Now, here please note these 15 participating states form the Heart of Asia region, while these 17 are the supporting states. Now, India is one of the participating states in the Heart of Asia conference, given it is a key player of this region and has always have a close ties with Afghanistan, with which it shares its borders. Now, there are few facts that you need to keep in mind from the point of view of prelims examination. That is, it was in the 6th ministerial conference that India hosted the Heart of Asia conference, and it was held in Amritsar. Further, there are 15 participating states of which India is one, and there are 17 supporting states of which US is one. This is very important. Further, now the de facto secretariat of the Heart of Asia process is the Directorate General of Regional Cooperation of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Afghanistan. This is a key point. Please Make a note of it. Now, next important point is that the Heart of Asia process is not only limited to the problems of Afghanistan, but it also aims to discuss regional issues in terms of economic cooperation, security, political stability of Afghanistan and its immediate member, for which it has identified three main areas of cooperation, that is political consultation, confidence building measures and cooperations with regional organizations. Thus, clearly, the Heart of Asia process is very important, especially in the time when US and NATO are trying to withdraw out of Afghanistan and it might compromise the regional security. Thus, this topic is very important from the point of view of both prelims and mains examination. Now, let's move on to the next article. Now, this article appearing on the page number 12 is important from the prelims perspective since it talks about the new development bank. Herein, the Finance and Corporate Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has been requesting for infrastructural funding by this multilateral development bank, the BRICS Bank, that is the new development bank. Now, this is important from the point of view of prelims because in 2019 a question was asked with respect to a similar bank, that is Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. Herein, the first statement suggested that Asia Infrastructure Development Bank has more than 80 members. That is, generally UPSC is curious with respect to the number of members that these international institutions have, and thus this is something that you need to keep in mind for almost all international institutions. Second is India's relation with these institutions. Second statement suggests that India is the largest shareholder of Asia Infrastructure Development Bank, and hence India's relation with these banks is also important. And third, that Asia Infrastructure Development Bank does not have any members outside Asia. Hence, one need to be really careful about the membership, the number of members, especially with respect to India's membership and region-specific members. Now, let us look about the similar details of the new development bank. Now, the new development bank, also known as the BRICS Bank, is a multilateral development bank that is jointly founded by the BRICS countries, that is Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. Now, this was founded in 2014 through the Fortaleza Declaration. Now, this is another question that was asked in the UPSC prelims in the past. You can clearly see how important this bank is. Now, in this summit, it was stressed that the new development bank will strengthen cooperation among BRICS members alongside supplement the effort of multilateral and regional financial institutions for global development. Now, in this bank, all the BRICS members hold an equal stake, and this works through a consultative mechanism. That is, all these 5 countries have equal stake and all decisions are made through the consultative mechanism. Its objective is to support infrastructure and sustainable development efforts in BRICS, and that is why the finance minister has been asking the new development bank for infrastructure lending. This bank has been headquartered in Shanghai, China. Its objectives are to foster development of member countries, support economic growth, promote competitiveness and facilitate job creation, and build a knowledge sharing platform among the developing countries. Now, New Development Bank supports both public and private projects through loans, guarantees, equity participation and other financial institutions. So far, India has got 18 projects approved by the New Development Bank, that includes an emergency loan of $2 billion to support the health spending during the COVID pandemic. Now, with this, we come to the end of today's discussion. Now, in front of you is the answer for yesterday's DNS quiz alongside the quiz question of the day. Please attempt this question and provide the answer in the comment box below. Thank you.